What's going on, everyone? Nick here with a set visit report for Alien Covenant. Now, thanks to a bunch of different outlets that were invited to the actual set last year in June, we got a lot of info for Alien Covenant, just a lot of the background story elements, character stuff, names for the characters, and really cool stuff to let us know more about the plot of this film and, what's going on in the larger scope of things. So this particular set report that I'm going to be reading from is actually provided to us by Collider, so shout out to them. I'm not going to go through the entire report because there is a lot of information, but I will be leaving a link to it in the description box and in the comment section so you guys can read it through yourselves and check out all of the info. So I'm just going to break down everything that we have in the report here that I found interesting and kind of talk about it at the end. So first up here we have that Alien Covenant does take place 10 years after Prometheus, which we all kind of knew, and the crew of the Covenant is not aware of what happened exactly to the Prometheus crew. Ridley Scott listened to the fan response after Prometheus, and Covenant is very much a return to the DNA of the original Alien film. However, Covenant will continue to explore the idea of creation myth as introduced in Prometheus, and the engineers continue to be a key part of the mythology. They talk a lot about how David was always intended to be the through-line character between Prometheus and Alien Covenant because he's such a great character from the get-go, and you can keep going further and further with him. We will see David as a disembodied head in Alien Covenant, but he will also regain the use of his body. Now, the interesting thing about this next point in here is that a film researcher was hired to put together an 8 to 10 page document about the rules of the world of Alien. Most of the rules came from the Alien films themselves, while the AVP films were pretty much disregarded as a different tangent of the franchise. As previously described, the plan for Covenant is to be the first film in a new trilogy that leads directly to the beginning of Alien. Scott wanted to reinvestigate the alien mythology because no one had explored who created the xenomorph and decided its special kind of creature. That hadn't run its course yet. Michael Fassbender said that Walter doesn't have any particular faults, and compared to the other synthetics in the Alien franchise, he is much more along the lines of Bishop rather than Ash. In contrast, David has spent the last 10 years on Paradise without maintenance, so his human qualities have only increased and grown with time. He says, quote, "There is much a part of him now as in synthetic qualities." David has spent the last decade on an engineered planet, and while everyone on set kept quiet about the details of what he's been up to, there's been various concept arts and things like that that show, the lab that we can see obviously in the newest trailer, and these various pictures, experiments that he's been conducting down there, because he wants to continue testing things out, obviously with the black goo and things of that nature to create new life. Because David does remain very interested in creation, but after watching his own creator, Peter Weyland, get killed by the engineer from Prometheus, he's no longer in awe of Weyland himself and has decided to move on and become a god of his own. So as for the character breakdown here, we have a couple of the names now. Catherine Waterston plays Daniels, of course, we knew that already. She's going to be the chief terraformist on the colonization mission, because she's an expert on all of the farming and equipment and machinery used to make the planet that they end up on habitable for other life. Daniels is of course married to the captain of the ship, Jacob Branson, played by James Franco, and as the first teaser trailer gave away, we see Daniels' character called Billy Crudup's character captain, so this does imply that James Franco probably doesn't survive for very long. Now next up here is kind of a spoiler alert, I guess you could say, because they talk about Noomi Rapace's Elizabeth Shaw. Originally, her character's appearance in the film was meant to be a surprise, and audiences weren't supposed to know how that was going to factor into the film, but since news broke out and kind of leaked, they did acknowledge that she will be in the film, but her details on her role were very scarce. They do say, however, that after landing on the engineer's planet with David, Shaw turns an engineer's sleeping chamber into her own domain where she was holding out for a while. They don't say how long she's been around for or what's going on with her, but things aren't looking good for the Shaw character. Billy Crudup plays Christopher Oram, the first mate and chief science officer aboard the Covenant. Like I mentioned earlier, he does become the acting captain early on in the film. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here is the giant engineered temple that we can see in the last trailer for Alien Covenant. It's, right in front of this scattered bodies of this giant mass grave. It's kind of the engineer citadel on this planet. And they talk about in the set visit here that there is a room or a chamber inside of that temple called the Hall of Heads, and it was designed to be ambiguous but a sacred place for the engineers. They wanted to make it kind of a monumental place that had backstory to it, or some kind of a worship place where the elders of the engineers could go there and there was some sort sort of a gravity to their presence, and it's where all of their information about their race was stored, and the giant engineer heads that are in that room represent the whole history of their race and their past. So that's all the info that I found interesting from the set visit. I have other videos coming up that are going to be talking about more specific characters in the film, because like I mentioned, all of these set reports gave out some pretty spoilery stuff, so definitely stay tuned for that in the coming days. If you guys are new to the channel and you like this video, subscribe for more content like this. We cover all the latest Alien and Predator news here at the Hybrid Network, and we have a podcast talking all about AVP, so we'll likely be talking about the trailer and all this info on the next episode. Thank you guys again for watching. My name is Nick, and I'll catch you guys next time.